Whoa, Virginia's instantly striking back after that Supreme Court ruling on Texas, yeah. It was a 6-3 decision where the right-wing justices basically said Texas can go ahead with their gerrymander to create more Republican seats. They want to carve out 5 new Republican congressional seats down there before the 2026 midterms. I got to say, that might just backfire on Texas, but Virginia's jumping right in with the response. The Senate President pro tempore, Louise Lucas, she's like, I've got something in store for Texas. And what does she mean by that? She says, I'll give a follow back to every person who I see tweet 10-1 tonight. By the way, back on November 2nd, 2025, she tweeted about 10-1. Remember when Republicans drew Virginia's congressional map? So black people were packed into one district and said we should be grateful they gave our community this district. Now they can have one district and see how much they love it. She's not mincing words there. And then we've got the Virginia House Speaker, Don Scott, the Speaker of the House of Delegates, talking last night about how it's possible to do a 10-1 map right there for the congressional delegation. Right now, the delegation is 6 Democrats and 5 Republicans. We'll see what happens. I mean, look at Donald Trump's MAGA approval in Virginia. The latest Morning Consult poll has him at 12% there. And that number just keeps dropping with each poll. And just so we can break down what the Supreme Court actually ruled and why, I think this opens up a massive opportunity for Virginia to do an in-kind gerrymander, like an offset, or maybe even multiple offsets, considering what MAGA is trying to do in North Carolina, Indiana, and kind of like what we saw with Prop 50 inches California to counter MAGA moves. Let me show you the Supreme Court's direct language here. With an eye on the upcoming 2026 midterm elections, several states have in recent months redrawn their congressional districts in ways that are predicted to favor the state's dominant political party. So the court acknowledges that one of those states is Texas, and the purpose is to get Republicans elected. And here's what they say. Based on our preliminary evaluation of this case, Texas satisfies the criteria for interim relief. In other words, the legislative map there is presumed to be accurate. Why? The Supreme Court says, first, the district court failed to honor the presumption of legislative good faith by construing ambiguous, direct, and circumstantial evidence against the legislature. Heck, the legislature in Texas was straight up like, we're going to make some racist maps. They literally said that. So I'm not sure where the ambiguity is, but the Supreme Court says if the legislature claims they acted in good faith, why even have a Supreme Court or courts to question them? Second, the district court failed to draw a dispositive or adverse inference against the people challenging the map. So the court said anyone who challenges it, you should basically view them as losing before the case even gets filed. Okay? And then they also say courts shouldn't do anything before an election, and we're too close to the midterms, so why even bother? We're just going to hold off. That's the framework. Now, I want to bring in Speaker Don Scott, the Speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates. We've talked to him before those November elections. You've expanded that majority in the House of Delegates since the last time we spoke. You said it was going to happen, and it did. But first, I got to ask you, Virginia striking back, what are you doing in the legislature right now regarding a response to this gerrymandering we see in Texas that the Supreme Court says go for it? Well, sooner or later, thank you for having me, but sooner or later, you have to stand up to the bully on the block. And I think Virginia Democrats made it clear that we're not going to sit on the sidelines while Donald Trump and Republicans in Texas and North Carolina and Missouri and Indiana and now Florida launch this unprecedented mid-cycle redistricting scheme to try to override the will of the people and tilt the midterms in their favor. The policies are so bad that they know they have to do something, and we have no choice. I don't think any Democrat wants to be in the position we are. We're against gerrymandering. We're hoping for a federal ban on gerrymandering, but we have to level the playing field. We can't pretend that they're playing fair while we sit aside and yell at them. we have to do something and fight back. And where I came from, if a bully punched you in the face, you can sit around and whine about it, or you get up and fight back. And I think that's what we have to do right now. So what can you tell us about what that looks like? When does this happen? What's going on? What can you share in terms of next steps? I mean, look, you mentioned 10-1 is not outside the realm of possibility. The Senate President pro tempore said she keeps writing 10-1, so I'd assume that means not outside the realm of possibility. Talk to us about that and what happens next. Well, as you know, right now, Virginia's congressional delegation is 6 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and we have an opportunity, I think, to take a look at it. First thing that we did, one, a lot of people like, well, tell us your strategy. You're an attorney. I'm not going to tell you my overall strategy, but I will tell you this. We've taken the first step, which is pass a constitutional amendment. That's what's required in Virginia to allow for mid-tenure deciding. So we've done that, and then we had an intervening election, which is required to pass the same resolution again, the exact same language, which we will do on January 14th. That is the first day of session. That's how important this is. We will do that on the very first day of session and pass the resolution to allow this to become a constitutional amendment that will then go to the voters. So we have to put this before the voters and probably trying to get it done in April so that we can impact the 2026 elections. We don't have a choice in this matter. This is a requirement and obligation to be able to protect our democracy from Donald Trump's rampant assault on it. We know that he doesn't care about democracy. We saw that on January 6th. And I think we have an opportunity now to make sure that we level the playing field in light of what he's doing. And I think that process will allow us to do that. And so then once we do that, we, the legislature, will be able to draw those maps. And we need to be very clear and concise and make sure it's community-based with some input to be able to get those maps drawn. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to get to a 101 map in light of the shellacking that we just put on the Republicans in Virginia this last cycle. Abigail Spanberger won by 15 points. We went from a 5-1-4-9 majority in the House of Delegates to a 6-4-3-6 majority in the House of Delegates. So I think we have a responsibility to speak up for our voters and protect Virginians from being disenfranchised. Look, my nephews say it's incredibly cringy whenever I try to do the 6-7 joke, but I like 101. 101 sounds really much better. That might be the new 6-7 101 baby. 101 is the next 6-7. So you're moving expeditiously there. But talk about the sentiment right now in Virginia, because when you and I talked last, there was a real affordability crisis. You have all the government workers there. You have healthcare premiums now are going to spike with the Affordable Care Act subsidies not getting extended. There's this full-fledged assault on the Commonwealth. I mean, it's an outward hostility from the regime against Virginia, and we saw that in the election. Talk to us about that. Well, when Elon Musk came in with Doge and basically came in with a chainsaw disrespecting these people who have put their life, many of them are veterans that work in the federal government. So basically had an assault on veterans through the federal government with his work with coming in with a chainsaw and cutting people's jobs. Not only cutting their jobs, but their livelihoods, their ability to take care of their families in a very cynical way and a harmful way. And I think Virginia sent a message of disapproval, and that is why Republicans were beat so badly. We won 5 districts that Donald Trump won and carried in 2024. That is, we won Trump voters back. And I think that's the story that's been missing on this. We won folks who they know that Donald Trump lied to them. He blatantly lied to them when he told them that he would lower the price of everything, that he would lower the price of goods and services, but everything's gone up from beef to cars to child care to health care. Everything's gone up. Nothing has come down. And people know when they've been lied to, And I think the gig is up for Donald Trump. People see who he is. He's just trying to line his own pockets and those of his family. And Republicans are allowing him and enabling him to do this, and they won't stand up. I think what happened is, and what's going to continue to happen is, it's probably not good to be MAGA when MAGA ain't on the ballot. Sooner or later, you have to be responsible. You have to stand up to Donald Trump. Republicans in Virginia found out that failing to stand up to Donald Trump for their own constituents hurt them, and I'll watch to see if they've learned any lessons. I think we need a robust, honest, two-party system. But right now, the Republicans in Virginia have lost the right to be a good governing partner because, and it's not just me saying this, the voters gave us these huge majorities because they don't believe they have a right to be good governing partners because they've not been able to stand up to Donald Trump in the face of his attacks on Virginia's jobs, Virginia's health care, and Virginia citizens, right? At some point, some of the things that are happening are really not about Democrat, Republican, Independent. It's just like responsible grown-up behavior as the floor. And these Trump candidates and Trump, like they're just not behaving as stewards of responsible governance, or set that aside, like they're not behaving like grown-ups. Like I just sometimes watch their behavior and I say, look, if a second grader was behaving like this in elementary school, they would probably need to be called out and saying, that's not how people behave, and that's on a daily basis the way these MAGA people just act. It's just strange behavior, and it has very dangerous consequences. Yeah, when you see Secretary Hicks, and these other folks, I mean, it's like the meanest people on Twitter who are anonymous actually are now running the federal government. It's like that's what's going on right now. We have some folks that are running the federal government that have zero empathy for the people that they're supposed to serve. They don't have it. They need to go out and touch grass and deal with some real people because they are so far removed from the struggles of everyday Americans that they have lost sight of what their responsibilities are. And so I think we have an obligation, Democrats here in Virginia at least, is to remind the country, we want to be MAGA. We want to make America boring again. You remember when you didn't turn on the TV and your anxiety levels didn't go up? We want to make America boring again. We have competent government, responsive government, and deliver at the end of the day. We want to deliver. It's not just good enough to win. You have to win, and then you have to deliver. And that's what we plan on doing here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. When I read that Supreme Court decision, I will end on this. It seems to be an invitation in a way that didn't exist before. For better or for worse, that the floodgates are open, legislators, whatever you do, we don't touch. And as long as it's partisanship, in fact, even in Texas, where there was a DOJ letter saying, hey, you got to do this in a way that deals with race, and we got to move Hispanics around. And then, and then Abbott was like, yeah, we got to move the Hispanics around. I'm like, that's what the judge cited. It's like, what? The federal district court judge is like, you're literally saying some pretty race-based things that you're not allowed to say after a 9-day trial. But even there, the most egregious of circumstances, the Supreme Court goes, you know what? We ain't touching this. So based on their own precedent, when we talk about 101 or whatever, they seem to be saying until a federal law is passed banning this, go at it. Just do whatever you want to do. I don't think that's a great outcome, but Democrats can't unilaterally disarm. It's, can I give you the final word? Yeah, we can't unilaterally disarm. I think Supreme Court Justice Kagan said it best when she talked about, the Supreme Court has overruled some Trump appointees who said this is racist, it's wrong, and it can't go forward at the district court level. And they just took a weekend and took a read and overturned all of it and know that they didn't get it right. And so I think we have an opportunity and an obligation, I think, to try to level the playing field to prevent the Republicans from totally manipulating the midterms. We don't have a choice right now. I mean, that's, if you can't figure out where you are in this. And lastly, what I'm going to say, spare me the Republicans lecturing us on what we're doing when they won't even say a word about what Donald Trump is doing. They're trying to say, oh no, Virginia's different, but you will benefit from that. And so they won't say a word about what's happening in North Carolina and Texas and Indiana and now Florida, but they'll try to lecture us. So spare me the lectures and the fake outrage here in Virginia. We have an opportunity and obligation to make sure that we protect the franchise for voters here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, to make sure that the people who've lost their jobs, the veterans who've been laid off have a say, and will have the ability to push back in the midterms to put a check on Donald Trump. Because we know Republicans will not, anytime MTG is the voice of reason in the Republican Party, you know, that train is off the tracks. And thank you for having me. Great to have you here, the 58th Speaker of Virginia's House of Delegates, Speaker Don Scott. Thanks for joining. Thank you for having me, my friend. And just to add a bit more context from what I've seen in recent reports, this all stems from the Supreme Court's the 4th of December 2025 order allowing Texas to proceed with their map after a lower court had blocked it as racially discriminatory. And Virginia's Senate had already approved a mid-decade redistricting amendment back on the 31st of October 2025 in a party line vote to push this forward. Let me dive a little deeper into this because, folks, this isn't just some isolated incident. It's part of a bigger pattern that's been brewing in American politics for years. You know, as someone who spent a lot of time thinking about global challenges and how systems work, I see gerrymandering as one of those flaws in democracy that can really undermine trust in the whole process. Back in Texas, the Supreme Court basically gave the green light to a map that was challenged for being racially discriminatory. According to reports from SCOTUS blog and others, the court ruled 6-3 to let Texas use this new congressional map that's favorable to Republicans, potentially adding 5 more GOP seats in the House. The lower court had enjoined it after a 9-day trial where evidence showed lawmakers were explicitly moving Hispanic voters around to dilute their power. But the Supreme Court said, nah, presume good faith and don't mess with it close to elections. It's like they're saying, as long as you call it partisan and not racial, even if it looks racial, we're hands off. And now Virginia's saying, okay, if that's the game, we'll play too. Senate Majority Leader Scott Survell has been quoted saying redistricting is full steam ahead after this ruling. Virginia Democrats are pushing a constitutional amendment to allow mid-cycle redistricting, specifically in response to what red states like Texas are doing. The amendment would let the General Assembly redraw maps if other states disregard the traditional decennial process. They passed it in a special session called by Speaker Don Scott back in October 2025, just days before the election, which was a surprise move that caught a lot of people off guard. Governor Youngkin and the GOP delegation are fighting back, calling it hypocritical since Democrats were against gerrymandering before, but Louise Lucas, that Senate leader, she's been blunt about it. She said something like, bet your ass we're doing this, blaming Trump for forcing their hand. And on X, formerly Twitter, there's a buzz about it, posts from users like Daily Cost saying SCOTUS bless Texas's extreme gerrymander, so Virginia's drawing a 10D1R map. Another one from Annie for Truth, highlighting how the corrupt SCOTUS ruling gives Virginia the go-ahead to flip 4 Republican seats. Even folks like John Collins explaining the 101 reference as Virginia's response to Texas. It's all over social media with people rallying around the idea that if Republicans are rigging the game, Democrats can't just sit back. Now, let's talk about why Virginia's in a position to do this. The state's political landscape has shifted dramatically. In the recent elections, Democrats expanded their majorities, going from razor thin to dominant, like 64-36 inches, the House of Delegates. Abigail Spanberger's gubernatorial win by 15 points shows the tide turning against MAGA in a state that's got a mix of urban, suburban, and rural areas plus a huge federal workforce that's feeling the pinch from Trump's policies, polls back this up. A Roanoke College survey from December 2025 shows Trump unpopular in Virginia, with approval ratings dipping low and political trust at some of its lowest levels in years. Morning Consult has him at net negative, and Emerson College polling showed Spamberger leading big before the election. Virginians are backing things like mail voting and photo ID, but there's anxiety on both sides. Trump's overall approval by state in 2025 polls from USA Today puts him net positive in only 24 states. And Virginia ain't one of them. It's trending blue with disapproval around 55-60% in some metrics. This isn't new. Virginia's been moving away from Trump since 2016, but the 2024 and 2025 cycles really hammered it home, especially with the tax on federal jobs via Elon Musk's Doge cuts. Veterans, government workers, they're a big voting bloc here, and they're mad. So when Democrats talk about protecting democracy from Trump's assault, it resonates. Historically, gerrymandering's been a tool both parties have used, but Republicans have mastered it in recent decades. Think about the 2010 Red Map project that helped them lock in state legislatures and draw maps that lasted a decade. In Virginia, they did it too, packing black voters into one district, as Lucas referenced. But in 2020, Virginia passed a redistricting commission to end that, though now they're amending the Constitution to allow a response to out-of-state shenanigans. The process is rigorous. It needs passage in 2 sessions with an election in between, then voter approval. They passed it first in October 2025, had the November election, and now plan to repass on the 14th of January 2026, aiming for an April referendum to affect the midterms. If voters approve, the legislature draws the maps, community-based, they say, but with an eye toward 101. That would mean flipping districts held by folks like Bob Good or Jen Kiggins, potentially. Critics say it's hypocritical, but Democrats argue it's self-defense. As Surovell put it, they're not sitting on the sidelines while Trump and GOP states like North Carolina, Missouri, Indiana, and Florida launch mid-cycle schemes. Florida's joining in now, per reports. This could set off a chain reaction, blue states offsetting red gerrymanders. In California, there was talk of Prop 50 to counter, though it didn't pass. Indiana's doing pro-GOP maps, North Carolina too. The Supreme Court's ruling opens the floodgates, as I said earlier. Justice Kagan's dissent highlighted how they overruled lower courts that found racism just whisking it away. It's a major win for Trump, as The Guardian noted, rejecting the lower court's finding of racial gerrymandering. Reuters called it reviving a pro-Republican map. NPR says it could help GOP win 5 more House seats. USA Today ties it to Trump's push to keep Congress control. A divided 3-judge panel had blocked it, but SCOTUS intervened with the 2026 campaigns underway. The PDF of the opinion spells it out. They enjoin the map, but SCOTUS stayed it. This isn't abstract. It affects real people. In Texas, Hispanic communities feel diluted. In Virginia, it's about protecting federal workers, health care, affordability. Trump's lies on prices, beef up, cars up, child care up, health care up, hit home. People see through it. As Speaker Scott said, the gig's up. Virginia won back Trump districts because folks know they've been lied to. Republicans enabling Trump won't stand up, so voters gave Democrats huge majorities. We need a 2-party system, but right now, MAGA's off the rails with MTG as the voice of reason. That's scary. Democrats want to make America boring again, competent, low-anxiety government. That's the goal. But to get there, they can't disarm unilaterally. So Virginia's fighting back, and it's a story worth watching. It could reshape the 2026 midterms, balancing the scales against GOP power grabs. If other blue states follow, we might see a more even field, though ideally we'd have a federal ban. Until then, this is the reality. Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million. Stay plugged in. Become a subscriber to our Substack at MidasPlus.com for daily recaps, ad-free podcasts, and exclusive content.